There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between radio and bar talk, between commentary and recaps, and it lies between the pit of man's Netflix subscriptions and the summit of his binge-watching ability. This is the dimension of podcasting and the Twilight Zone. These are the Zone-i-sodes. And now your hosts, Brandon Davis and Scott McFarland.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies and TV in some cases. And welcome to the 8th episode of our Zone-i-sodes review of every single stinking episode of the Twilight Zone. And we are going to be looking at Time Enough at Last. With me today to look at this is, as usual,
Brandon Davis. I host classics, and the world's a little less funny today since Don Rickles died. I'm just going to say that. But
I figured you're gonna put that in there. Luckily, we're recording this right before it goes live, so it actually will be timely.
It's timely. So I wouldn't have said it otherwise.
Now the next 2 episodes will not be as timely. And we also have our first special guest. I put out a call for people to tell us what their favorite episodes were, and the first person who named one that was coming right up was this. So with us today is
Craig. Hi.
Hi, Craig.
I'm special.
In many ways.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Craig, what do you do here since everyone likes their titles?
Associate Editor-in-Chief of the Front Row Movie Reviews. And
how's that going?
So I'm the one that pays the bills. And pays the talent. Luckily, we don't have any of that, so I don't have to worry about paying it.
Truth.
And then I also host Beyond the Mouse, our Disney-themed podcast. And I have a really adorable cat.
Who's drinking beer?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a given at this house.
Truth. So I'll go ahead and get us started with a brief synopsis, and then we'll dive into Brandon telling us what Rod had to say, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Henry Bemis is a terrible employee. He's a bank teller who can't make change, and he reads on the job. When he goes home, his sociopath wife makes his life just a bit more miserable, so that he is properly prepared for the next morning when his boss continues to make his life miserable. Until one morning when World War III starts and ends, while Henry is in the vault. Henry doesn't seem to really care about the death of billions, just as long as he has his books. Although he soon realizes that probably an optometrist surviving would have been helpful for him, as his glasses break, leaving him with plenty of books and no way to read them in the Twilight Zone.
Nice.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah.
Brandon, what did Rod have to say?
He says, "Witness Mr. Henry Bemis, a charter member in the Fraternity of Dreamers, a bookish little man whose passion is the printed page, but who is conspired against by a bank president and a wife, and a world full of tongue cluckers and the unrelenting hands of a clock." Just a moment.
Sorry, go ahead.
I had to say that carefully. But in just a moment, Mr. Bemis will enter a world without bank presidents or wives or clocks or anything else. He'll have a world all to himself without anyone.
Hearing Rod Serling say that was not as fun as hearing you say that just now. Just saying.
Tongue cluckers.
Tongue cluckers. All right, well, first let's kind of talk about our first impressions of this and kind of our memory of when we first saw this. And because we have Craig here today, let's start out with him and put him on the spot.
So what's funny is you mentioned that I said that this was my favorite episode, which I thought that it was, and then I went back and watched it yesterday. I think it's just more the most iconic episodes, to use Jeremy's word. It's one of those episodes that's constantly parodied or referenced in a lot of pop culture. And as a kid, it was kind of striking because of the whole H-bomb aspect of that going off while he's in the bank vault. But when you think about the actual story, having watched it again, I I guess maybe it's because I'm older now that I'm going back and watching these as you guys go along, and I would have to say my favorite has changed. So you might have me on again.
You're just trying to get on more than once. Is all you're doing right now.
I really enjoy the billiards episode.
That's a good one. It's one
of
my favorites.
I would say that's actually probably moving up the list, but I think it is appropriate. Speaking of, we just had a special address from the president talking about shooting missiles off into Syria. So it's just a constant reminder that even though we feel like times have changed and we don't need to do the duck and cover drills and a lot of the political statements that the Twilight Zone was trying to make during this episode, a lot of that's still relevant today and still kind of scary that's a possibility out there. I mean, if there were a nuclear holocaust, I don't know if I would recommend going outside and sleeping on a couch. But
the couch shielded him from radiation. It's fine.
So anyway, so first impressions, I really did enjoy this. I really did enjoy this episode quite a bit. As a kid, I remembered it. It was one of the Twilight Zones I really vividly remembered. But now going back and watching it, it doesn't hold up as well for me.
You were having the same experience I had with the Lonely last week.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to that show. So out of curiosity, Brandon, you're about the same age as I am, a little younger. But Craig, did you actually have to do duck and cover drills in school? See, I actually did. Brandon, did you have to? No. Yeah, it was elementary school. I don't think it happened much, and they claimed it was for earthquakes, but it was basically the same kind of thing. We did watch the film strip with nuclear weapons. It was quite fun. So that would have been 87, 88?
I was born in 87.
Oh, okay, you are younger than me. All right, well, so about 87 or 88, they were still doing it, at least in lovely Silvis schools. But yeah, I think obviously the nuclear piece is something that's going to come back in the Twilight Zone because, well, the Twilight Zone was filmed in the middle of the Cold War, but this is the first time we've dealt with it. Brandon, you're up.
To me, just watching it again, this is what Rod Serling and this show does best. It's a very simple story that could be told in a little paragraph, but somehow, because which you did, but just once again, as I always say, due to the casting of an amazing actor like Burgess Meredith and the tone that's set and the times that it was in and everything, he just encapsulated in 25 minutes just a feeling that everyone was having, this feeling of uncertainty, this feeling of wanting companionship. And he also there's also a little bit, which I was reading up on, of Serling's commentary of the anti-intellectualism movement that was going on at the time, about how, which goes on in every generation. People are always a little suspicious of people who are a little too bookish. But
that's not at all relevant today. There aren't a lot of dumb people ruling the world or anything.
Well, I goes unsaid, but
I think it was just said. But hey, David Copperfield's now doing magician stuff, right? Magician stuff, right?
Yeah.
He was talking about the magician, right?
Yeah.
David Copperfield?
Okay. Yeah.
Definitely not the Dickens.
Yeah.
Scared the Dickens out of him.
But no, but unlike Craig, this episode does hold up for me. I think it's one of the Serling's best. I don't know if it would be my particular favorite though, but I do think that it deserves to be in the top 3 or 4 of the Twilight Zone episodes.
I'm sorry for laughing. I'm laughing at Craig's cat, but I'm also laughing at the way you structured that grammatically. You said, unlike Craig, this episode holds up, which means that Craig does not hold up.
Have you seen my bald spot, man? I'm not holding up well.
So I'm kind of in
30, guys.
Don't remind me. So I'm kind of in the middle on this one. It obviously, if you look at the rankings for like the top Twilight Zone episodes of all time, this one is either in the 1 spot every time, or it is very, very close to the one spot. And I think Craig is right in some of that. I think it's because it is probably the one that's shown the most, so people recognize it the most.
Yeah.
But I also think Burgess Meredith is something that needs to be some person needs to be talked about here, because his portrayal of this is something that I remember the most. And obviously Burgess is going to come back a lot. I don't have a tally of what actor showed up the most in a starring role in the Twilight Zone, but I'm going to guess it was Burgess Meredith. And he shows up. We are. And he actually shows up in one of my favorite episodes, which is one of the hour-long ones, so we won't be there for a while. But
until 2022.
Oh man. But in terms of the episode, I think it's a good episode because it does have it has a simple story, as Brandon said. I think following Henry Bemis around, he's a likable character, which was a problem I had with a couple episodes ago where you had no character who was likable. You felt for him because his wife was legitimately a sociopath. I've never seen somebody that mean ever.
His boss was a dick too. I mean, it's kind of nice to see all these awful people die. I mean, not see them. You actually do see the boss, but
did you see the boss, or do you see his tape recorder?
You see his hand.
Oh, okay.
Holding the tape recorder.
You do.
Which is like, what kind of a narcissist reaches for the tape recorder at the end times? Maybe people to do a podcast. I don't know.
He wanted someone to tell his life story.
I'll tell you what. There are times at work where I wish I had a dictaphone too, because I'm getting tired of typing. So I'm all for the dictaphone. My interns would not be, though. And so in terms of, I mean, I don't remember the first time I saw this because, like I said, this one is shown so much that we've all seen it 100 times. I think it holds up. Is it one of the best episodes of all time? Well, we'll talk about that when we get to our rankings. But that's my first impression out of it. Brandon, let's talk about a little bit of what worked for you.
What works for me the most, and we've already mentioned it, is Burgess Meredith. Like I said, our biggest issue with Escape Clause a couple episodes ago was that David Wayne's portrayal of that character was just totally unlikable. And you cast this incredibly likable actor in this role, and you're really, from the beginning of the episode, you feel for him because he's totally alone in the world. Even when there's people there, he's alone. Because there's no one else quite like him. And then, and once the bomb goes off and he's left to himself, you really sort of go on this little journey with him, and you sort of you feel his despair when he wants to take his life. You feel his joy that he doesn't have to be around these terrible people anymore. You go through the emotions when that final cap on the episode happens at the very end. It does break your heart just a little bit. And his performance just really makes the episode work. I mean, the writing in the episode, of course, is wonderful too, and just the way it's shot and the way it's set up. As we mentioned, the budgets for these shows now are going up as we're tracking through season 1. But just the quality of the episode overall is good. But for me, it's Burgess Meredith that works the best.
Yeah, Craig, what do you got?
I liked his portrayal. I did like Burgess Meredith quite a bit in this. I also liked just the, you guys have talked about how much Serling wanted to, how controversial really the show could have been, and how much of a risk it was for them to put it on network TV, and the political statements that were trying to be made. And so obviously this is like one of those that really just slaps you in the face, It actually reminded me somewhat of the first episode of the Twilight Zone that you guys went through, that he spent the latter half, the last 12 minutes of the 25-minute episode on his own, just kind of wandering around the town, which I thought was an interesting parallel considering it's not that far into the series, but it was for completely different reasons. The first one being this trying to make sure that man could reach for the heavens, and this one for showing that man can also destroy the heavens. It's just a really interesting, I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition between those two episodes that were sort of similar. And I liked that he was able to use that storyline again, or use that plot device of being the last man on Earth again in a completely different way. So that worked for me a lot.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just going to say, and we've mentioned before, Serling has about 4 or 5 different plots that he just reworks again and again in totally different ways, and of course the isolation is one that's constantly used throughout the whole series. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as we kind of talked about a few weeks ago too, we're now into a place where all of his scripts that he wrote before, or at least came up with before the pilot came out, are gone now. So now he is definitely in a realm where he knows he at least has a season. And so this is the first time we have true political commentary. We've had commentary on death, immortality, death again, the moonshot. But this is the first one where it's like we have a chance here to destroy everything. And I think that's going to be something he comes back to again a lot. But it's nice to see the political commentary starting to come out in this show, because this show, and I talked about this, our first like our episode 0, this is one of those shows, because of the theme and because of the ability to have fantasy, it can talk about things that other shows cannot. So I think this is truly the first time where he's starting to stretch that. Brandon, I agree with you. I think the number one aspect of this episode is Henry himself and Burgess Meredith. I love Burgess Meredith. He's a great character actor. We joked last week, him as the Penguin stands out. I have somewhere at my parents' house, I have a Burgess Meredith action figure because I have the Penguin action figure from Batman 66. But obviously most people know him from his later roles as in Rocky as Mick. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the other characters, I don't think they hold up. I mean, even the lady at the bank at the teller window at the beginning is not really an impressive character. The boss is a jackass, but there's not much to him. The wife is just certifiably nuts, but it doesn't matter because they're all dead within the first 10 minutes of the episode.
Yeah.
So you're able.
Why make the choice though? Like, why make the choice to make them so unlikable? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because that's what didn't work for me, is that they are like caricatures of awful people. And I mean, when it comes down to it, he was reading a book probably every day while he's supposed to be focusing on being a bank teller, and he gives out the wrong change. I mean, this guy is not a good employee. So like the boss in particular, maybe if they made him a little bit more sympathetic, you might kind of feel for him, and it might have given a more emotional impact to the fact that they're all dead. I mean, the first airing of this, like, we've seen it 100 times, but that was probably a pretty jarring episode when it first aired. But I feel like, is that why you think that he made them all such jerks? Because he didn't want them to also carry the emotional weight of that event happening? Or
well, this was no, I was just going to say, this is kind of an era of entertainment where everything was a little more cookie cutter. Bad guys were bad, and you didn't really, explore the depths of them too much. So I think in order to make your good guy extra good, you had to make your bad guys extra bad. And so that's one thought I had.
But was Henry a good guy?
I think Henry was a space cadet, and
he's
probably on the spectrum
he's not,
somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd call him a good guy. I think you would call him sort of a relatable guy, a guy that Serling wants you to relate to in some ways.
But Craig, I think you may have hit on something here, because I've been trying to figure out, because this episode doesn't it doesn't really wow me as much as it wows other people. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad episode, but it just doesn't strike me as one of the really great ones. And I was trying to kind of figure out why, but I think you may have hit on it in the fact that we pretty much are shown at least this large city is evaporated, is gone. And it's kind of implied that it's not just the city, that everything is gone. And so that should carry some more weight to it. And part of that is that Henry, as I kind of joked in my synopsis, doesn't put much weight to it. I mean, he talks about suicide for about a millisecond, and he honks the horn of the car to try to find people. But really, at the end of the day, aside from shouting his wife's name a couple times, he doesn't care either. And so him as our protagonist not caring about the end of the world, we don't care about the end of the world. And I think that does dull the impact of the episode just a bit. So I think you hit on something there, Craig, that I was trying to figure out why I felt that way, and that's probably why.
It's because I'm a genius.
Well, okay. So Craig already kind of opened the floodgates, but Brandon, we'll go back to you. What are some of the things that didn't work for you?
I mean, I do agree with you all that, you know, even though they don't spoil the greatness of the episode for me, that the supporting characters are a little too just one-dimensional. But you know, I was comparing it to Where Is Everybody as I was watching it, because I said it is very different. And Earl Holliman's character in that first episode is really sort of this all-American everyman, whereas Henry Bemis is much more of a niche kind of character. And I think he's still relatable, but you're right. As I was watching it, though, as wonderful as Meredith's performance is, there's still something about him that leaves you just a little cold. But I don't know. It's weird. Like y'all are saying, I love the episode, but you know, you can't quite put your finger on exactly what leaves you cold about it. Maybe that's what Serling wanted, but you know, I think the tone of the episode is fine. I think the writing of the episode is fine. But at the very end, when the glasses break, there's just something so there's something so heartbreaking about it to me, and there's such despair to it. Whereas at the end of Where Is Everybody, you know, you have a little bit of hope when he's looking up at the moon, and there's just no hope at the end of this episode. And of course, that's the political statement he was trying to make. But yeah, I don't think there's too much about this episode that doesn't work for me, though.
I was going to ask, when are you guys going to have Rod Serling on? This is supposed to be like a West Wing Weekly type show, right? So, you know,
well, we do have a ghost episode coming up soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I agree with you, Brandon. I mean, it just struck me like watching it again yesterday, for the first time in probably 10 years. I was like, why did this stick with me so much? And I think it's because it does still have a huge impact, and they do show it all the time. And Burgess Meredith does do a great job. But I don't know. It as an episode, I think that there's better ones out there.
Yeah.
You know. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, all that's making sense to me. I kind of already hit on what didn't work for me. So we'll just kind of roll right into our closing thoughts on this. Craig, I think you've kind of already hit on it a bit on how you feel about the episode now, but is there anything else you want to add about the episode itself, or in general where we've, since you haven't been on here to talk about it, where we have already been with Twilight Zone and what you're looking forward to as well?
Well, I'm looking forward to another 100 and some odd episodes of your mugs on YouTube.
147 after the
really, oh man.
Really, I think it's a really timely piece to do right now. When you said that you wanted to do a Twilight Zone show, I think it's a really good time to do that, because you mentioned, actually, Scott, in one of your first episodes, that the anthology show isn't around as much anymore. It's kind of making a comeback, though, if you think about American Horror Story, but also Black Mirror on Netflix. Those are so modeled after the Twilight Zone, and it shows how relevant this show can be today, and some of the political themes that we're dealing with. I mean, things like race, or the episode that the two opposing soldiers that can't communicate with one another. The threat of some kind of world-ending event like a nuclear war. Those are still so they permeate our culture throughout any time, really. So I think that's why you could revisit this, and these shows can be timeless in that way. Also, to connect it to something that I love, Walt Disney World will still forever have the Tower of Terror.
I hope so.
When you get to that episode, I can't remember what the episode is that they stole the clip from, but you'll have to do some research there and make sure you note that is the episode that plays before.
With the really bad dubbing of a Rod Serling wannabe.
Aren't Henry Bemis's glasses in the Tower of Terror?
There's a lot of
Yes,
stuff
they
in
are.
the Tower of Terror, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Book of Man is in there.
How to Serve
Henry
Man.
Bemis's How to Serve Man.
Yeah. Well, I forgot to mention it when we did Escape Clause, but the elevator is inspected by, and I'm blanking on his name now, the name of the devil in that episode.
Oh, and we just talked about it a couple of weeks.
Okay, well, everyone's shouting at us now who's listening. But the devil inspected the elevator, and there's that little plaque there. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. The dummy is in the basement when you finish up. The other thing, too, with our version of Tower of Terror, and Craig, I think we should do like a special just on Tower of Terror, especially in September after I get back from it.
Sure.
But our Tower of Terror has two separate towers. So there are two separate rides. And depending on which one you ride, there is different stuff in the basement when you come out. Now, the California one is the same ride complex that kind of spins off. So you get the one show. Even with Guardians, though, it's going to be a one tower thing. So you could easily ride Tower of Terror several times in Florida and see different things because there are two different rooms full of stuff when you come off the ride.
They've also automated the drops. So it used to be that you just dropped once, and now you could get millions and millions and millions of combinations of ups, downs, big drops, small drops, which keeps it interesting as well. So definitely go out and check out that ride. You always go to Disney World.
It is one of my favorite rides at Disney. Yeah. I don't get out there often, but when my kid sells 2,500 boxes of cookies, I get to go. So we'll check it out in September. For me, I think we've hit on a lot of this already, so I won't belabor the point. But I think we're on upswing here, and kind of Brandon mentioned this before we went live this time. It is starting a few episodes ago, or I would argue probably the last episode. There is about 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes in a row that whether you rate them highly or not are some of the most iconic episodes and the ones that get shown a lot. So we have a lot to talk about here in the next few weeks. Brandon, what do you got for closing before we go into ranking?
No, there's, like we've said, there's just sometimes when things are iconic or when they're classic, to use Jeremy's word and my word, you really can't always put your finger on why it is. There's something just absolutely intangible about it. And this episode has that for me. I don't know what it is. It's the combination. I think the sum is greater than the parts in terms of this episode. That there's just something about the way it comes together that really sticks with you. And when TV Guide back in 1998 did their list of the 100 greatest TV episodes of all time, this and The Invaders were the two episodes of the Twilight Zone that were on that list. I remember that. And then they did another list in 2000 something, I forget. It was 2 other episodes of the Twilight Zone. But this episode's been parodied. It's been done. Had homages to it done to death and everything. There's something about it. I don't know if I would call it my particular favorite episode. I think I'm going to have to wait until we're at the end of our run to really tell you what my favorite episode is, because we're rewatching them all and it's all kind of now fresh in my mind as we're watching things in a row now. But yeah, it's one of the 4 or 5 that stand the test of time, and if you were to make a time capsule of the Twilight Zone, it's one of the episodes that would go in it.
So we'll go ahead and move into our ranking. For those who haven't listened to this before, we rank these episodes 1 through 10, and we compare them to other episodes. So a 5 ranking would mean it's an average Twilight Zone episode, 10 being the best of all time and 1 being the worst of all time, and somewhere in the middle. We'll start with Craig first. Now, Craig, I have to warn you, I'm not entirely sure if we're going to use your score because I haven't figured out how we're going to compile these yet. But we'll take your score and advisement, and we'll see how we feel about it later on. So, Craig, what would you put Time Enough at Last?
Well, thank you for telling me that my half hour has been worthless here.
Just pretend you're a Republican in Illinois voting for president. It doesn't count.
Okay. Or a Democrat in Sangamon County. So let's see. Let's do 7.2896.
Oh, now I'm definitely
repeating.
not because I don't want to use that math. So you made it easy for me. So
7.2.
Okay,
Actually 7.3 because I did 7.29. So.
Yes, use your significant figures, Craig. So Craig's putting it around a 7. Brandon, where are you putting it?
I have to say I came into this discussion ready to give this episode a 10, but no, I gave Walking Distance a 10.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. So, but I have to say, as we were talking about and talking about the flaws, I don't like it as much as Walking Distance, so I'm going to give it a 9.
I'm in the same boat, but I'm a harder scorer. I actually went back just now and checked my score for Walking Distance. I really need to compile these now since we've actually got several ones going. But I gave Walking Distance an 8, and the other higher episode I gave was Where Is Everybody? I gave a 6. And I think, as Craig mentioned, this takes the Where Is Everybody episode and kind of builds upon it. But I still think Walking Distance is the main episode, and I'm starting to feel that I'm probably questioning my 8 because I think I've artificially lowered my entire scoring set from now on. But I'm gonna try to stick with it at least for now before I break my curve. So I'm gonna give Time Enough at Last a 6 as well. It's above average episode. It's very close to a 7. But I think maybe part of it is the fact that I've just watched it so many times. It doesn't impact me as much as it did. But I'm gonna give it a 6. So
all right,
we're kind of spread out on this one, especially Brandon.
Yeah.
This is probably the difference we've had. So this first off, thank you, Craig, for joining us. We'll probably let you join us again. It is nice to have somebody else on here. And I do want to put out the call because we're going to have 156 of these when we're all said and done. If you have an episode that is one of your favorites that you would like to talk about, we'd be happy to see if you can come on here too and chat with us so we can kind of break this up a little bit. One thing we didn't do, Brandon, yet is we haven't closed out with Rod. So what did Rod have to say?
The best laid plans of mice and men, and Henry Bemis, the small man in the glasses who wanted nothing but time. Henry Bemis, now just a part of a smashed landscape, just a piece of rubble, just a fragment of what man has deeded to himself. Mr. Henry Bemis in the Twilight Zone.
So with that, we'll go ahead and close things up. Craig, you want to give the shameless plug since you're on?
Sure. I've just been sending people to the website, www.thefrontromoviereviews.com. You can get everything you want to there. You can contact us, find our social media links, listen to all the Beyond the Mouse episodes, and everything else that we have too.
Great. And when you do find us on iTunes from the website or on Slacker, Stitcher, whatever, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast and give us a rating. So we can get moved up in those search engines so other people can find us. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, same idea. Please be sure to subscribe and like the video. People only get to see it if you like the video, so it winds up in their search engine. So even if you can't stand us, help us out. Get us a few more views. Until next week, I'm Scott McFarlane, and with me has been...
Brandon Davis.
Craig McFarland.
Craig. Bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
Oh my God. Nightmare fuel. Thank you. Hey, actually, that kind of
All
works. And until next time, we'll see you on the couch. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Zone-i-sodes. Zone-i-sodes is a special presentation of the Front Row Movie Reviews podcast. For more information, go to www.thefrontrowmoviereviews.com.